Thank you.
Good evening. I will call the October 11th, 2018 Select Board meeting to order.
And I will call the Essex Junction Trustee meeting to order. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody, and if you haven't signed in, we would love you to do so.
And if you could put your cell phones to silence, that would be appreciated as well.
And do we have an introduction? Greg, want to make an introduction? Why don't we do that?
Sure.
I'd like to introduce Rita. I'll let you pronounce your last name.
Posey.
Posey.
It's Posey Rickettis, but my family goes by Posey.
Seeing her at some of your meetings, and just wanted to let you know that her face will
Be more comfortable sitting right up here between Greg and Elaine. Would that be good?
Perfect, thank you.
I think we got to do agenda changes and additions. First order of business, agenda changes, additions, everything good? Do we have any changes, modifications to the existing agendas?
Not to the agenda. We do have a revised sheet that will be put out. Lauren had made some corrections that had been brought to our attention, and they were just minor and formatting, but we'll pass it out.
No, I appreciate everyone bearing with us.
Yes.
It was a hectic week and trying to get policies to everybody after the trustees reviewed them and some other glitches, so you have everything now, and I appreciate the patience on that.
Okay, great. So we don't need to do any action on the agenda. It is as it
It is
is.
what it is.
All right. Do you want to take it?
Sure. Okay, next item is public to be heard. That's a time for the public to speak to the trustees and select board tonight on anything that's, items that are not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone here wishing to speak during public to be heard? Okay, thank you all. Then we'll move on to our business segment.
Okay.
George?
Yeah, the first order of business is an update from the Governance Subcommittee, and I will try to do a very brief outline of what we did. The subcommittee met twice on July 7th and the 19th of September. Both meetings were at 81 Main Street. They were warned. We had members of the public at one. I don't think we had any members of the public at the other. I was elected chair. Elaine Sobchak was appointed as recording secretary. At our first meeting, we developed a list of potential governance options. We also generated a list of questions along with those options, and that's included in your packet. And we'll get to that in a minute. Next, the other action of the subcommittee, we decided to recommend to both boards that we hire an attorney, Dan Richardson, to provide legal guidance on potential governance options, charter change process if necessary, interface with the state legislature if necessary, other legal issues that we may get to. And again, we can discuss why Dan Richardson, why not somebody else. We can get to his credentials and so forth and our reasoning for doing that when we get to that part of the agenda. To anticipate potential financial impacts on governance reorganization options, the subcommittee submitted a list of questions to staff regarding town-village tax revenue, budget growth, percentage distribution of funds, funding and other resources received from the Chittenden County Regional Transportation Committee, and we had some other questions associated with that kind of information. We wrote up a list, we amended it, and we gave it to staff. It's a little lengthy, and staff has asked for some time to respond, which we think they should have. And finally, the subcommittee recommends continuing the subcommittee process in order to work more efficiently with legal counsel and staff to investigate the governance options with the aim of delivering a thoroughly researched set of recommendations to the full board. If I could just ask everybody's indulgence for one moment, and I don't want to use my privilege as chair to just express my own opinion, but if I could just give my own thoughts, I have actually wrote a few things down earlier today. Would that be okay? I'll only ask your indulgence for about a minute about why I personally believe the subcommittee process should continue. Would that be all right with everybody? Getting nods all around? Okay, thank you. Every one of us has questions that we want answered. And I wrote this because I have to say, back last March, I thought we'd be further along on this whole thing than we are, frankly. I'm sorry, but I did. And I think we all have questions we want answered. I think we all have insights we want to share. I think we have concerns that we want to express. I think that we all feel a certain degree, and I know that a couple of people have sort of expressed a little bit of frustration to me at the slowness and the awkwardness of this process. So we all have in common a certain degree of frustration and a certain desire in thinking that this should be moving a little bit quicker and be a little bit more predictable. What we don't have in common, and I would ask everyone to consider, is that the content and the nature of our questions are all different. What might concern me, it maybe isn't that big a concern to someone else. What one person thinks is critical to pay attention to, someone else might think is trivial. I think at our first meeting of the subcommittee, what we said is that all options are on the table, all ideas are acceptable and presentable. We're not going to leave anybody out because we don't want anyone to go away feeling frustrated. Further complicating, and I thought about this today, further complicating the process is the fact that we are in uncharted territory. And I've said this before. What I mean is that both of our charters, village and the town, provide a framework of how the Board of Trustees can operate, how the Selectboard can operate, but our charters and our policies don't present us with a framework by which we can interact and negotiate with another elected body over whom we have zero control. We have to be nice to each other. That's pretty much the only way forward. There's no guiding light or higher authority that's going to come in and tell us what to do. Whatever we're going to do, we have to do it ourselves. I think we also have to recognize that we set administration on a course while we were figuring this stuff out to look at potential alignment opportunities, potential collaboration and coordination opportunities between village and town departments. A lot of those things require our decisions. They require our input and guidance. For example, if we look at the agenda tonight, there's an item on there for potential, look at policy for purchasing. I think it's on here. That involves finance as much as governance. And because it's a policy, we have to give some approval. Staff doesn't have the unilateral authority to make those kinds of decisions themselves. They have to bring them to us and we have to give consent. And there's a lot of that. And if we think of the last few previous joint meeting agendas, I think a lot of our time has been taken up with that sort of thing. And I anticipate that that's going to continue. And I think that, to me, those kinds of decisions can only be made by the two full joint boards. They can't be made by a subcommittee. And so I think it makes sense to say we have to give priority, or we at least have to give staff the opportunity at the upcoming joint meetings in the foreseeable future to bring those questions to us and get guidance from us. Unless we want to say to staff, stop all further alignment efforts, stop all further collaboration efforts, and focus purely and entirely on governance question. I don't think we want to do that. That's not what we've decided to do. So I think we need to stay the course on that. I don't want to continue, but I just want to say one last thing, finish up. I think that the only way forward is to have tolerance and faith that if we approach this with the idea that ultimately we'll reach a good goal, I think we'll get there. But I don't know how long it's going to take. I think we initially thought that we would be able to bring something to our annual meetings by March and April, but that may not happen. It's taking a little bit longer. Scheduling meetings is taking a little bit longer. But I would like to recommend that we hire Dan, that we present to him the initial group of questions that we came up with at our first governance meeting, subcommittee meeting, that we get some answers. There was a lot of legal questions in there. that we get those answers, we put it in a report, bring it back to the joint boards at our next meeting. That would be an opportunity for people to ask other questions, all the other questions that people may have that haven't been answered or they feel haven't been adequately addressed. We can then add, and then we can begin to have a dialogue with someone who can answer some of these questions. And I believe that that's the right way for us to go forward. And so I'll stop talking now and we'll get on with the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
Well, we should stay on 5A then, just to see if there's other questions.
Okay.
Any members?
Yep.
Andy?
I disagree with continuing the subcommittee. The reason that we formed the subcommittee was to accelerate the process. And as you select board may recall, I chose not to participate in that subcommittee because I only had 5 days available in the month of July, and it was, the intent was to have a bunch of rapid fire meetings to get these, questions nailed down and try to get answers. And I don't see that any, very little progress has been made at all. And George's comment about things that are important to him may be trivial to me, and things that are important to me may be trivial to him, is the very reason why we should have all of us in the room during these discussions. I think if we had, instead of deferring to the subcommittee, had we had the previously scheduled joint meetings that were canceled in favor of the subcommittee, we may have been able to have a made joint progress. I have concerns in that when I read these minutes and this documentation of governance options, none of my ideas or questions aren't even considered there. So I'm not sure that the subcommittee has even seen my questions. I don't know.
I didn't see them. I didn't see a separate.
So I'm very, that's the point. That's why I'm saying that I don't think the subcommittee is the way to go. I'm really, really unhappy with the progress the lack of progress that's been made, and the fact that I don't seem to be able to provide input to that subcommittee to steer the discussion. I mean, there's questions in here that I think I provided some input to. I mean, I researched all of the town charters in the statute, and I gave a report on that, and I don't see any reference to that anywhere in any of this documentation. And so I don't know. I'm very concerned that the subcommittee is going down a path that it's choosing and leaving out a lot of input.
Lynn?
I recall when the subcommittee prepared to meet the first time that we invited all board members to submit questions. And at least we invited it during a meeting, and then we followed up with an email asking for questions. And the only people that we got questions from were committee members and you. So we did see your questions. And I'm pretty sure that we discussed your questions at a joint meeting. And at one point you said, okay, that's good, you've answered my questions. So I'm pretty sure we did deal with your questions. So if you've submitted a second set of questions, then that we have not seen. But we did talk about your questions I believe, at the last joint meeting, or the joint meeting prior to that. I had one other thing to say, but if you want to.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And in terms of the slowness of the process at the moment, one of the things that was unexpected that held us up was that when we had the conversation about the different kinds of potential governance scenarios, the next step was to go find some guidance to help us decide whether any of them should come off the table. And so it took time to make appointments and talk to folks at the Secretary of State's office, and it took time to make an appointment to talk to the folks at the League of Cities and Towns. And when those appointments finally came around, we learned that there was nothing they could do to help us, and we were back at square one anyway. So those were unexpected delays. I mean, I thought for sure that both entities would be able to help us, but I was not, I was incorrect. So the next meeting we had, we jumped right ahead to, yes, we need to get some assistance, and we saved some time by referring to a attorney who had already been vetted by the village and by the town manager's office when we had the opening for the village attorney, and this attorney was not chosen, but we kept his materials because we thought we might have a need for someone with that kind of expertise. So, I mean, I just want you to know that we weren't not working on it. There were some surprises that we didn't expect. And I do recall all of the information that you used, that you gave us regarding your research on the incorporated villages, and that is really important research. And I have it, I'm ready to go with it, but I don't know that our subcommittee is ready yet to take your research and bring it in to inform our conversation, because that's why we need the attorney as well. So your information is going to supplement and inform our conversations once the attorney comes to the table. I just want to share that with you. I feel terrible that you feel like we're either discounting your contributions or ignoring them, because that is certainly not the case.
And I forget where we said we would be at this time, because Andy said we're going slow, we haven't met some expectation. I don't recall what that expectation
We were
was
supposed
where
to
we would be
submit
here.
a paper to this group tonight.
A
We
re-
were supposed to submit the results of our research tonight.
Yep.
And we're not, because the delays in getting assistance, the delays in being, getting the right information prevented us from doing that. So yes, we are behind schedule, but this is the kind of process that I would much rather take a long time doing right.
Well, we said we'd have a report, but what did we promise would be in that report?
The summary of our research, and then I believe we were going to make recommendations of a handful, maybe up to 4 potential scenarios for the boards to consider together. And then at that point, we would say, we would, as boards, would decide, do we still need a subcommittee or not? So,
Because I think it'd be nice to be able to really define what those
Sure.
expectations are, so that the subcommittee could try to focus on that, and if we're not gonna make it, we can inform them. But without knowing exactly what it is, a pace that you're gonna be on, I disagree that we're going slow or going fast. I mean, we need to define where we wanna go, when we wanna go there.
well, I think we did do that, Max, but
Yeah.
especially by saying that we would have a report. I mean.
But again, what's in the report? I don't care, a report means nothing.
Well, like I
it's the
said, it
content.
was going to provide our research to date and our recommendations for the board, both boards to consider together,
Right.
if
And I
I'm
think-
recalling correctly.
I think what we've discovered is that we had one idea of how quickly and easily we would move, and but as I said, having none of us gone down this path before, what we anticipated didn't match up with the reality of what we were. When we finally got in, when we finally started talking, we wound up putting, I didn't count them all, we have how many, 8, 9 possible governance options?
9.
Because once we started parsing them, we found, wait a second, this one is nice, but what if we also did this? And so we just kept generating a bigger list of questions. I would say that if we had had more people in the room, the list might have been up to around 14 or 15. So, and I don't mean that cynically. I just think that, and I don't think, Andy, there's any desire to have anyone at the end of the day feel that any question that they have hasn't been answered. I will say, Lori had sent us a question after the committee started.
Yes.
And
Prominently displayed in the minutes, yes.
yes, and it was a little awkward in the sense of it was after the committee had started, and Lori emailed it to us, but I think Irene said, and I agreed, that at our initial meeting, we said no ideas would be off the table, all options would be considered, and so we did add Lori's, and if someone else had sent us a suggestion, we would have added that as well.
The other reason that we put Lori's question on the agenda was because we had voted that these were the scenarios.
Right.
We had voted to approve them, and so if we were to add another one, we had to have another conversation. So I feel like, again, I feel like we might be missing some communication from you, Andy, in terms of questions, because I had thought that your questions had been answered in a public meeting, and so if we haven't seen all your questions, then that's a problem, and we need to get them as soon as we can. But again, because we had taken an action on this list, and we were gonna make a change to it, that's how it ended up on the agenda.
Yeah, I'd just like to offer that anyone on the select board or the trustees who has questions, to get them in, and let's make them part of this document before we send
Absolutely.
it to whichever attorney we hire, because I think I heard you say, George, anyone who got their questions in before the first meeting or something, I would like to open it up, and since we haven't really started the research, let's get as many questions as we can before we hand them off too.
I would only suggest that, and I don't have a problem with that, but just for consideration, if we have a ton of questions already,
Sure.
and maybe getting those answered, and everybody sees those, and maybe an answer that it will kind of help guide your other people's thinking, and maybe the question you want an answer is sort of there already, so that's another way of looking at it. But there's no intention to sort of stifle anyone's questions or anyone's input. That's quite the opposite. I think what we're trying to do is create a process by which we can facilitate it, because what I'm alluding to is the fact that at these joint meetings like this one, we have so much else on the plate. And I know I felt frustration the last few joint meetings where we don't get to talk about the governance stuff until like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. Everyone's burned out because we've done all these other technical things. And it's like, I have a lot of questions that just I have to sort of bring home with me. And so in my mind, the whole subcommittee process is to have an entity that's collecting those things and interfacing with an attorney to get some of it answered, or with staff, or whatever resources necessary.
Andrew?
The only things that I would add, I agree that there's value in the committee. I personally thought that it would have happened faster, but completely understand that scheduling these things takes time, and no one would have expected. I had also assumed that the LCT and the Secretary of State would have said, yes, we can provide some resources. With that being the case, and there not being another person or body that you can go to, I can see the delay. I would like to see the committee continue, and at our next meeting, what I would like to have is another conversation to say, has the progress been sufficient? And maybe we should spend some time to help define what that sufficient progress would be. And then with regards to the comments and making sure that everyone's comments and questions are answered, if we're gonna give a list of questions to an attorney now, I'd rather see that be a complete list of everybody's questions, instead of send questions off, have answers from those questions, then come back, get some more questions, send them back again, and have there be less of a back and forth, and more of a, here are our questions, let's get them answered, and have that just be round one. On a technical question, one thing I just wanted to make sure was verbalized, I didn't see it in here, was scenario H about forming a city with a mayor and city council. That's something that could be inclusive of many of these other scenarios, and not necessarily a standalone.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone think that if we got rid of this subcommittee and did it just on these every other joint meetings where it's just a piece of the agenda, that would speed things up?
No.
No, but speed is not the only criteria we should judge the process by.
Sure, exactly.
But the complaint was that it's not moving fast enough. So that's why I was
Quantity
asking.
or quality?
That wasn't
Which one do you
that
want?
wasn't the singular complaint, right? The other
That was one
was,
of your complaints, that we were not making fast enough progress. And I don't think if we did it just in joint meetings, that that's gonna speed it up, but I think the consensus is that's true, but not. Andy?
I would posit that the things would move just as fast with the subcommittee than without. In fact, I think we'd be further along, as I said, had we not chosen to go down this path. That was one of my concerns. The other concern is the fact that you have limited inputs, and I don't even know, are we actually going to discuss any of these options tonight? Can I make comments on this? What's our intent for this meeting?
Well,
It says no action on the agenda, so does that mean?
It was supposed to be just an update.
Well,
Where the subcommittee was.
right,
So-
we can make comments on them, but I think it would be what does everyone want to do? Do you want to open it back up and start amending a document, or
Yes, but maybe that should be done in writing,
it should be what?
done in writing,
In writing?
so that we're not taking up meeting time.
Okay.
And that gives Andy a chance to go through his notes and his charts to whatever, and everyone else.
I mean, at any time, if we continue the subcommittee process, Andy, at any time, I mean, please, send it directly to me. I'll make sure it gets on the committee and it gets.
So we
it
were
gets
told
out
to
there.
send it to staff, so that's what I did. And so if we're going to change that, somebody tell me.
I'll check my email as possible, that I saw it and forgot to forward it on. If that's the case, that's completely my fault, and I'm gonna check tomorrow first thing and see if it's there. I do remember seeing stuff from Andy, so it is possible that it's in my inbox somewhere.
I don't think we want to change policy, I think we still want to
Yeah,
send it directly.
Send it to me, please. That way we can
CC me.
keep all the records. And we'll try to keep it straight.
Yes.
Well, actually, Elaine had her hand up, and then we'll come to you. That's okay. Elaine?
Well, I just want to say, while I certainly understand the value of both boards together having conversation about these subcommittee findings and such, I think we're like one meeting away from bringing it. I want both boards to have a substantive, focused, comprehensive conversation with all of the facts at hand. And I would rather do that with our attorney present, once we've decided to hire one, so that those interesting questions that we can't answer could be answered. So I guess I'm asking for both boards' indulgence that we allow the subcommittee procedure to continue for at least one more meeting, so that we can narrow down our focus and talk to the attorney and have more details, and then we can have a really significant conversation at the board level with just this on the agenda, because we have multiple. I mean, we tend to squeeze a lot into our joint meetings, and so perhaps the next joint meeting, we just talk about this.
When is our next joint meeting?
December 5th.
I mean, I would suggest that if we start interacting and get the question, start getting our requests to the attorney now, the subcommittee might be able to meet once and maybe even twice, but at least once between now and our next joint meeting, so that we could have a much more focused piece of body of information to present to the next joint meeting in December.
Excuse me, one of the goals we had in the subcommittee was to go through that long list of scenarios and take out the ones that were either not legal or weren't going to work. And that will shorten the amount of time that both boards will need to grapple with the longer list. And so if we have an attorney by our side while we're doing that, it will be that much better a list. But,
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I have to, I'm sorry. You
That's
go
okay,
ahead,
so,
I'll speak next.
I was gonna suggest basically the same thing, that we allow the subcommittee to meet again, because the attorney may be able to shoot some of these right off.
Yes.
Or also may have some really good advice on how we should proceed that we're not thinking about.
Yes.
But maybe what we could do is and I know this is probably gonna make it not even happen, but when you schedule it, if you schedule it at a time that if the rest of the board members want to be here, they know they're available. So maybe do a doodle with all of us, but knowing that it is a subcommittee meeting and, we're audience members, we're not on that. Again, I don't wanna hold that up because that could mean it's not gonna happen until January, but it's an option.
Okay. So since we said we're not going to take any action, I guess we're making that recommendation, but when we can't, can we
Right.
take action on something we said no action on? I hadn't really thought about that. I think we just anticipated that we would continue, and I didn't know it would be a question that we wouldn't. Bit of a conundrum here.
Well, I think it's a sense of the two boards, what I heard.
I don't think it's a conundrum at all.
Right, it's a sense of the boards that say, we already have the subcommittee process going, and saying, well, let's
Okay.
not make any changes to it, so that's
Okay.
really not requiring a vote.
Okay, and
The only thing I would like to add is I would like to suggest that we do have a defined report, or at least an understanding as to what a report would be that we would get, and when we would receive that report,
Okay.
to help provide some guidance to the subcommittee. So to just throw something out, what I would like to see at the next joint meeting that we have, like in December, is a report from the subcommittee on the answers to the questions, along with which recommended scenarios to consider further research on.
Okay. Okay. Mike?
I second that. I agree that the subcommittee, I think looking for some help from the state and finding out after a period of time that you couldn't get it and you wound up having to backtrack, I still think a subcommittee is gonna be more nimble than 10 of us in a room. I truly do, and if it takes one more meeting for the subcommittee to find its stride, then I'm all for the support of that. I like Andrew's idea of winnowing down some, coming to us with a plan of action and what you suggest, answers to the questions, and then the 4 or 5 or 6 or however many options you think we need to continue to move forward.
Okay.
I think another meeting, I think to scotch the subcommittee now would be a mistake. I think at least one more meeting.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Evan, you had something?
Oh, I was originally gonna offer up not to bring any policies to you on December 5th, and then I rethought that when I'm thinking about maybe, I will try not to. I know I think we have at least one police policy that we may need to bring, but if we have to be inefficient and bring it to one board first and the other board second, we'll try to do that too. But if not, we will just keep it to just this topic.
Okay.
And I want to mention that I'm on the subcommittee. I said I could meet on the 19th of September. Turns out I couldn't. I'm a Red Cross volunteer and got deployed to Massachusetts at that time, so I apologize to everybody for not being able to be there, but I had to make a priority call, and I decided that was the right thing to do, to get deployed. So, but the 3 other members met and did the work without me, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
I would like to, I think the only 2 other pieces at this point in terms of the update, do we want to dig into and go back over and revise the governance scenarios, or are we happy where they are, and just invite anyone who has some additional thoughts and questions to send them along? What's everyone's preference?
I would not go backwards. I'd leave what you've
Okay.
got here.
Okay.
And I would solicit, make sure that Andy's questions get in there.
Absolutely.
And solicit any other ideas that want to get added to this.
Yep,
But I would not go backwards.
absolutely. And
I'm just surprised, I guess, because we added Laurie's scenario in the last meeting, so why can't I add another one if I have one?
you can.
I thought you just said don't go backwards.
Well, just
No,
send
I
it.
just said that.
Just email it to the.
Just email it to me and we'll put it on.
Well, I'm
make
sorry,
sure
I
that-
thought Mike said let's not go backwards and reopen the discussion.
No.
Just meant right now, too.
I said, what I meant, Andy, was that I did not want to go back and eliminate the options that are before us now, the 8 or 9 that are before us now. And then I specifically said, get Andy's questions answered, and if anybody else has any ideas, submit them in writing
Right.
now. But don't go backwards by going back and revisiting the 9 that you've already come up with.
Okay, good. Good.
My man's opinion.
Yeah.
I think Irene had her hand up first, yeah.
I'd still like some more detail from Laura on what you mean by separation of town and village, so if you wanna submit that or speak to it.
I can do either, I was just making a note that I can
Okay.
flesh it out,
Thank
if you
you.
want to just have it for the next meeting.
That'd be good.
Thanks.
Okay. Andy?
I was just gonna ask or implore, if I write something down and you don't understand it, please ask me questions about it before the next meeting, because I don't wanna, we have this list of definitions, right? If I use a new word that we don't have a definition for, or there's something that you don't understand about what I'm trying to ask, please contact me and ask me what I mean.
That's fair.
Because I don't want it to get lost, because we can't have a conversation about it.
Okay, good. I think if we can move on now, and I appreciate everyone's indulgence and good thoughts.
Mr. President,
Yeah.
if I could fire just one more question.
Sure.
Is there a way that we can see the questions submitted with the instructions of do not reply to all, just so we can see them ahead of time?
Sure.
I think
Okay.
over the next couple of days, we can piece together everybody's emails, kind of cut and paste them, put them together. At the top, do not reply all.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you a new one with
All right.
with additional questions that I thought we were going to talk about tonight.
Okay. So we'll wait.
Please.
Okay, I'll
When
tell you
can you
what.
submit it?
What's today? I gotta think of
Today's
today's
Thursday,
Tuesday.
11th.
Early next week, but
Yes,
Tuesday-ish.
Yes.
That'll give us time to get the packet ready for Selectboard, which is right upon us tomorrow. And so we'll wait till late Tuesday, but we'll cut and paste everything that we've got. It'll be a lengthy email, but we'll do it.
Okay,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Okay, I would like to, at this point, move on to the question of appointing Dan Richardson as special counsel. And I don't know if you realize, but Dan is with us in the audience. And Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure.
And I don't know if we can get a seat at the board really quick. Is that possible?
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Richardson. I'm an attorney in private practice with Tarrant Gillis and Richardson in Montpelier. I practice in the area of both general sort of civil litigation, but particularly representing municipalities, dealing with municipal law. In addition to that, I also teach municipal law down at the Vermont Law School, which is the only class in the state that really sort of covers the soup to nuts issues, and it's funny because the first class of the year is always the issue that you are all grappling with, which is, well, how do we organize a municipal government? What does it look like? And you know, you ask somebody what is a select board versus a mayor versus a city council versus a city manager, and you get the blank stares, because I think a lot of people haven't put the kind of thought that you've started to put into this, and that go into how do we organize on a local level that makes sense given the vast variety of needs, and what's the difference between, you know, a mayor, like the mayor, Chicago style, versus, you know, some of the lesser mayors.
I like that.
I'm not trying to put Evan out of a job.
He has a chief of staff, he's gone through several of them.
But, you know, those are the kind of issues that I deal with and in the class, and obviously that all municipalities face, and particularly in situations like what you're starting to, or have been wrestling with, which is this merger idea and what it looks like. So I'm happy to go into any details or any questions you may have, either I see you've taken a look at my resume,
Yes.
and I'm happy to answer any questions or deflect blame for anything.
I might want to qualify that a little bit, Dan, and say we're not going to get into actual legal questions. We're not going to get free legal advice here. I think we have to make a decision. I could be wrong, but maybe I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Dan. But
I'm good at keeping it sort of to a minimum, but no, I'm happy to answer any initial. I mean, I was listening to the last debate, and I think it's an interesting question because, you know, you are faced with this sort of genesis problem of what does this new thing look like and how do we want to organize it? And I'm not surprised you didn't receive a lot of support, input from either Secretary of State's office or from the VLCT, because it's a somewhat unique question. And there are a variety of options that are allowed under Vermont law to how that organizes. And I guess one of the things that I would, you know, hope to be able to help either the subcommittee or this large group is, you know, with some of the wide options that are available. I mean, it can be anything from a total merger where the village is subsumed into the town, to a partial merger, to you know, the town of Waterbury has given a very recent example, which is that the town absorbed a great deal of the village's municipal responsibilities, but they created a new district, a special district, the Edward Knapp district, that, you know, took on as a successor a lot of the village functions that were not fair to put upon the town. So that presents another model in and of itself, and special districts certainly are the current rage in municipal governance structures, because they allow for that sort of self-created flexibility. So there's a wide array, and I can continue to talk about it all night because
We're all ears.
Can you just come up with our solution?
yeah.
So I don't have any questions. I think it's a great idea to hire someone with this caliber of knowledge to help us move this along.
Yeah, and I think that what someone else said, and that what Dan has just said, is that a lot of the time, we think we're asking lots of questions, but we might not be asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important piece that we haven't gotten to, is that Dan, after looking at everything that we're saying, might say, yeah, but you forgot about this. What do you think about this? So I think that's really key to keep in mind. Other questions for Dan?
Evan, did you have your hand up?
Well, we discussed when we were on the phone, who's your client?
Oh, that's a great question.
And I'd like you to touch on why you recommended what you did.
Sure. So I recommended actually have a retainer letter if it meets the board's approval. I should be answerable to both boards. And use Evan, so Evan's a joint employee of both boards. He answers to both. Because this merger question really does touch upon what the existence of both municipal entities are going to be, I think it's appropriate and proper for me to be essentially a servant of two masters in this respect, so that it's not seen as, well, I'm promoting the interests of one body over the other. But I'm really here to be as much of a resource for both sides as possible. That way, there's no confidentiality conflicts between the boards. You know, the information I give would be releasable to all of the boards. And then Evan can act as effectively the day-to-day overseer, so that if I need to be activated or I need to have the brakes put on because you're moving in a different direction, he can be that point of contact and make sure that that sort of day-to-day control is continued. But then it doesn't create, I mean, this is kind of a merger situation, and when you have that happen, you know, you each have your own town and village councils that will give you specific advice to your own body. And what I would be just simply the neutral, who would say, okay, this is, you know, these are the options, this is my analysis, I'm not in any particular favor, I'm just responsive to the joint motion, so that if the boards do verge, you would have your own counsel to go to ask those specific questions, where if you felt like, wow, this is really not fair to us, or this is not sensible as our needs, you could take that private counsel. But then anything you were relating into the joint committee could then be shared and could be analyzed in that respect. And that's my recommendation. I think it just makes sense because it's a very special project. You know, it's got a certain lifespan, which is, it may take a while. And you know, you can look to Northfield, you can look to these other communities that have tried to do this, and it's taken them a long time. It's not something you can do very quickly, because ultimately this system has to stay in place. We don't change town governments overnight. And you know, it's not as if there's an evolving process. Well, we can use this as a placeholder and adopt something else. You kind of have to get it right from the start. Otherwise, it won't function well. The citizens won't support it. And it won't achieve what you're hoping to, which is, you know, some greater efficiency and effectiveness, rather than having sort of two entities bumping heads. You have one, or you know, one with an overlay that works more efficiently. And so I think having that, having me in that position, then it also limits my charge as well, because I'm not expected to give separate advice to separate entities. You can go to your own attorneys of your respective municipalities for that. It just limits me to how does a merger, what does it look like?
Okay.
And I apologize to follow. The other thing we talked about was, how does Montpelier see this and your role
Sure.
in that process? Because whatever charter changes these bodies would be looking at has to get approved by Montpelier, correct?
Correct.
And so how do they view this and your role in that process?
Skeptically, but so the way this process works, and thanks for that prompt. I'll try and hit the softball. The way in which it works is ultimately what these boards decide would take on the form, and that's where I can be helpful, is drafting these choices into language that would become a new charter. And that charter would have to be passed by these boards, it would have to be passed by the voters, and then it has to go to Montpelier, and it has to go to the House and Senate Government Ops Committees for their scrutiny and review. And those committees, you know, the best positioning of anything you decide to do is going to be a change that's popular and supported generally by the boards and by the individual citizens. If you have something that doesn't seem to work, or you're trying to push it through, it's gonna come with some difficulty, because the Government Ops Committee it's a fairly conservative committee in the respect that they don't wanna test new things out, and they don't wanna approve things that have any type of issues. They do want to make sure that whatever charter change, because whatever charter change they approve, and ultimately the legislature approves, becomes law. It's the binding law for this municipality. And so they do take their job seriously. In the past, when I've helped municipalities with charter changes, you know, there has been a fair amount of scrutiny. The best example I can think of is a few years ago, City of Montpelier had Berlin Pond under its control and was regulating it until the Supreme Court said, well, you can't really regulate something that's not within your municipality. You don't get to reach into Berlin and regulate. And they were relying upon a set of rules that had long since been repealed from the Public Health Department. And so the City of Montpelier, in reaction, said, well, we're going to change our charter to allow us to do this. And it went through, it passed the popular vote, you know, Montpelier, do you want to regulate part of Berlin? Sure. And it went to the Government Ops Committee, and it died a horrific death, because they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Because it was challenging something that went against really the grain of both what we expect municipalities to do, as well as it was in conflict with A&R policy. And so, you know, they don't just rubber stamp, they don't look, and part of my role would be to help shape that with you, and then help shepherd it through, because at some point that's gonna go up to those government ops committees. And, you know, if we've done our job right, it's more of an explanation. This is how it works, here's our background, here's our history. It's not necessarily me saying it's someone of you who can explain, this is my community, this is why we've decided to do what we want to do. And in such a case, you know, hopefully their technical questions will be limited, and it can receive approval, but it does have to go through that entire legislative process.
Okay. Any more things?
I have a question.
Sure.
In our packet, we received a copy of an email you sent to Evan about the scope of work that you would do for our boards, and one of the items you said was to develop a public process to create public engagement. And I was wondering if you could describe what you meant by that, and if you have any examples of what you might have done in other communities.
Sure. So the public engagement is particularly important for the reasons that I just articulated, which were, you know, because this ultimately has to go before the voters. They have to buy into it, they have to understand it, they have to feel as if, you know, they've had an opportunity. I mean, you can already see within this board, when people's voices aren't heard or, you know, aren't responded to, we chafe at it. We want to be, if we've to put in the work and have the concern. So I think this joint board has to make sure that whatever they come out with comes, has an opportunity to go before the public. Because if there is large scale support, you want them to be able to speak out. If there's not, if there's dissent, if there's issues that either you as boards have missed or that are, you know, haven't been fully explained, you want that opportunity. And that's the only way you get that sort of public buy-in. And then so it's important to design, you know, the statutes are fairly clear as to what kind of public process. And this board is going through it, but it's also sort of reaching out to the various communities and stakeholders and making sure that they understand what these changes look like. And so in the past, what I've done is really just a series of public meetings that range from very informal meetings of, this is what's been proposed, this is what the boards have discussed. Here's an opportunity, a public forum for you to come and talk about it and ask questions. And I think if you do that, and then also, you know, it may be a matter of promoting, having material that explains it, because the charter language itself is going to be technical language. And it may not explain to everyone, it may not explain to the person on the street, what does this mean to me? Does this mean that I'm gonna have zoning where I didn't have zoning, or does this mean I'm gonna have, some type of regulatory, am I gonna lose something? I think a lot of times people are afraid that, if there's a proportional representation, for example, you go from having an at-large election to having wards or districts. People need to understand how that works and what that entails, because there's concern of what they may lose. And so I think part of this will have to depend, and part of it will be built upon how the process works with this board. I'm not as familiar with the issues that are driving your town and your village to make this merger, or what's prevented it in the past. I mean, there are some things that are inherent in there that I can predict, but knowing what's driving that, I think, helps shape the public process.
Okay. Any questions?
Have you seen public input at any of those sessions ever change the proposal?
No, but that's not to say it's not ineffective. I mean, a lot of times, let me take that back. There's often tweaks that occur. Somebody has an issue. What about, depending upon, zoning's often a big one, because it's a typical town and village. And I think there's zoning in both the town and the village here, so it's somewhat different. But in other places I've dealt with, there've been those distinctions, and so people get excited about that. And so there may need to be clarification as to how that impacts and changes. But a lot of times, it's just simply explained, so that people know the world isn't ending, or, this is what we're predicting. It's easy to get really excited about something because it's like telephone. If you haven't been in a direct conversation, you simply hear about it. And you say, oh, this must be the worst thing in the world, because Bob said it, and Jane said it, and Sue said it, and I trust them. But they may be misreading it, or they may be passing along misinformation or misdescribing information that they overheard. And I think there's only one cure for that, and that's direct engagement.
Other questions for Dan? Everyone good? Andy?
Just a clarifying question, are we only asking questions to Dan now, or are we asking general questions also, or are we going to have more discussion after we finish talking?
I think we have more discussion, but I think that the item that's before us on the agenda would be a decision by each board, I guess joint boards, jointly, to whether to hire Dan at the outset, work with the subcommittee to respond to the questions, as we've already said, and take it from there. So that would be the preliminary piece, and where that gets us and where we go after that, I think we'd have to see where we are. It's a little open-ended. I think Dan's probably, I guess, amenable to that, and I don't really know. I don't think we can really say where it's all going to end up. I would anticipate that, as Dan alluded to, if anything we come up with involves any kind of a charter change, unless we just decide we're not going to do anything, but if we are going to proceed with a charter change, we are going to need legal advice going forward. We would need legal counsel at our public hearings. We would need some legal advice on crafting the charter change, and very likely we would need some legal help getting it through the legislature. So that's kind of how I see it.
So each board would need to have a motion to appoint. No? I don't think we can do this in joint, can we?
No, I think we can.
I think you could do it as a joint board, but it would have to be a majority of both boards.
Okay. And?
So you didn't answer my question.
Okay.
My question is whether we're going to have discussion about this generally after we finished asking Dan, because you gave us the opportunity to ask Dan questions. And I just have a question for the boards.
Yeah. Well, do you want to add?
So I'm just wondering
are we
are we going to finish talking to Dan and then start that discussion, or is it all wrapped up in one? That's the question.
It's one topic on the agenda, so it's kind of all rolled together.
Well, we can, I'll totally leave it up to you. What's your preference?
Okay, then, can I ask my question?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll just ask my question. So Dan said that his client was the two boards, but you talked about the subcommittee interfacing with him. Do we need to explicitly state that each board gives the subcommittee the prerogative to act on their behalf in interacting as the client, even though the whole board is the client? I just want to make sure
I
that.
get you. Misunderstood.
I think, excuse me, Matt, I think in our minutes, or when we agreed on that, on recommending that the boards engage Dan, that I think that is what we recommended, that we asked each board to delegate the authority to work with Dan. I'm just trying to look in the minutes to see.
And I'll just offer.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead,
A little
Dan,
bit
then
of,
you can-
just from my experience in being retained by towns and villages when there's subcommittees, I don't require a different retainer or essentially direction. Once the client says, we've hired you, you're our attorney, I'm there to act as
Yeah.
an agent. And so if the boards have directed so, and I think that gets into more of the informal, I don't think you have to necessarily make a formal
Yeah.
delegation of that, because the subcommittee exists really as a agent of the larger boards, and you haven't delegated actually any decisional power to them.
Right,
No.
They're there to sort of carry out the work,
right.
so it
Right.
would follow from that.
Maybe I'd put it this way. If we continue with this, if the subcommittee works with Dan for another couple of months, and then the joint boards decide, we all want to get involved. That doesn't change anything in terms of what Dan's doing. I don't think we wouldn't have to renegotiate the contract or anything like that. It would just be something, we could just do that.
Evan?
And the recommendation is that I'm his point of contact.
Yes.
He works under my direction. If it is my direction that he attends the subcommittee, he attends. If he can with his schedule, he attends the subcommittee. If I ask him to answer the questions of not only the subcommittee, but of individual board members, trustees, select board, he will do so. But he's doing so under my direction, under the authority that you give me, as you did with the town attorney and the village attorney.
Which is the way that is today.
That is how it is today.
Andy, does that answer everything?
So I think the answer is that the two boards can approve, and the fact that the boards established the subcommittee to have the discussions satisfies the need to delegate that authority.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so unless we have any, I think we can hear a motion and then ask questions, but I will make a motion that we hire or appoint Dan Richardson as special counsel for the town and village for matters related to consolidation.
Second.
And any further discussion on this?
No, this is just for the trustees?
Well, I think, as I understand it, we can all vote on this. Is that what are your thoughts, Dan? We'll get through
Yeah, I
the
think there
advice
can
right
be,
now.
acting as a joint board,
Mhm.
that motion could be for both the village and the town. It's just that the vote count for it to be binding
That's
because of this would have to be a majority of
Okay.
both the village and of the town. So it's a unique quorum question.
It's a good thing for us to know,
So
though.
the motion maker and the seconder can be from one board, but yet it could apply to the other board
Correct.
in this situation. Okay.
Because you're sitting here meeting it as a joint board, and so your minutes, your actions are really reflective of this joint board.
Point of order.
Yes.
That's contrary to every vote that you have taken and what you have told the public in the past. And I understand he's telling you it's legal,
Doesn't make.
but I question whether you really want to go down that road. It may be just simpler so that it doesn't become an issue in this process down the line.
Okay, why don't we do it the way we've traditionally done it, but going forward, now that we have a lawyer who's actually telling us how to run joint meetings, maybe we can consider changing our practice going forward. How about that? So I will have made my motion, and since Lori very conveniently is on the trustees, is that okay? And then I guess I will,
I would prefer that.
any further discussion for the trustees? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So it's 4-0.
Okay, what's the select board's pleasure? Anyone want to make a motion?
I move that the select board appoint as
Special counsel.
special counsel
For the town.
for the town.
Thank you, Mike. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Irene, further discussion. Andy?
I'm concerned that Mike specifically said the governance committee, subcommittee.
You can change it to the town then, right?
If we just read off the agenda, it would be the same
Yeah,
motion
just
that
read the
George
agenda.
made.
It'll
In
be-
the same motion.
That's fine.
Okay.
Same motion, same language.
Is that clear? Okay.
So it's not appointed specific for the
Yeah.
subcommittee, it's appointed to the
Make sure
town,
we do this right.
reporting to Evan. Okay?
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, so any further discussion on that?
Was there a second?
Yes, Irene did.
And she accepted the change to it? Yeah, okay, just want to make sure.
Okay. Irene?
I would agree with Barbara that we should continue to vote separately as separate boards, even though we're occupying the same space.
Just.
I
We are representing different populations,
agree with that.
and we shouldn't be mixing those
Okay.
carelessly.
Okay, anything else? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of appointing Dan Richardson as special counsel for the town, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Dan, thank you for coming up. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Now while he's here, ask him all the free questions.
All right, excellent.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next item of business, which is 5C, and it's about the co-location of the rec departments. And Ally and Brad, how do you want to come on up? I'd have to bring a chair.
Here, do you want to sit here? No, we're gonna, okay.
We're going to co-locate in one place.
There's a theme.
I like the symbolism.
You're kind of wearing the same color. I know. This is good.
Okay. So, yeah, we read what was in the packet, very interesting. We'd like to hear a little bit more from you.
Great, we have two memos. I'm just going to cover the first one, which is alignment. Sarah and Lauren have been whipping and grinding us to make efforts towards alignment. And so Ally and I came up with a schedule. You can see 4 meetings over the course of the next several months, touching on administration, parks and facilities, personnel, and programs. This is separate from the co-location conversation, and really about just seeing where we are aligned and where we're not, and figuring out at least a list of things that are not aligned, and so maybe it's something that we could work towards over time. We also have, coming up this week, a parks tour with both of our staffs. There'll be 16 of us, I think, altogether. And we're both administering personality assessments with our staffs, and we're going to have an hour-long kind of discussion. So also not just working on the policy and procedures end, but also on the personnel end, and starting to get our staffs comfortable with each other. We had our first meeting on September 19th, and it was great. It said 10 to 12, but I think we went over 3 hours. And so I think it was a good start. Nicole and Caitlin sat in for part of that conversation, and so things are moving forward. So this is mostly FYI. If you have any questions, you can let us know, but this is more just letting you know about some of the efforts that are being undertaken to work towards alignment.
Thank you, that's good, good insight to see that alignment is going on. That's great news.
Yeah.
So you want to talk about co-location then?
Sure. No questions on the alignment stuff? No?
Anybody?
Anybody?
I didn't see it on the agenda, so I didn't read that memo, so. It's not listed on the agenda as an item.
It was in the packet.
Yeah, no, but it wasn't listed as an item.
It's covered underneath this 5C.
So in regards to co-locating, we want to explore the concept of co-locating and moving Essex Parks and Rec 81 Main Street staff over to 75 Maple Street. And starting to, again, nothing changing with either charter, where we would coexist, but as two separate departments and entities as we currently do now, we would just be under one roof. But the process that we would go through with approval would, start to streamline things with the one-stop shopping aspect for recreation. Oftentimes it's, can I get a pool pass? Is your pool the one with the red slide or the spray ground? Or can I do this camp here? No, you gotta go over there. Of all ages, ranging with all of our needs and our parks and things like that and reservations. So we hope to eliminate some duplication, provide convenience for recreation shopping, so to speak. And again, not just meeting to, on a schedule to say, hi, this is who I am and this is what I do you do the same thing? But actually starting to see each other's, work ethics and how processes are done and become constant resources for one another in a much more convenient way. Again, preserving our identity, it would just, it might look confusing at first, but I think it's gonna help move along the alignment conversations and processes a lot quicker if we're together. As you know, if you don't meet often enough, then things kind of slow down. So if we're all under the same roof, we're hoping that speed and quality go with one another on that one. So we are looking to get your feedback on how you all are feeling with this idea based on the information from the memo and see if we can move forward with this idea.
Okay. So, right. I'll open it up to questions for either Ally or Brad. Lauren?
So I think this is really, really good. And I will say I've gotten a couple of emails from people who have read our packet, which thank you for residents to reading our packet, who have also commented that they think this is a really good idea. And I don't really have a whole lot of questions about the how or the why. More of the, kind of going back to our meeting on Tuesday, and Ally, you were here with the Senior Center, let's make sure that they're not separate. They are part of rec. They should be part of your bonding efforts and all your alignment, so I just want to put that out there. But I applaud you both for coming forward with this, and I hope it happens.
Yeah, and our Wednesday gathering next week involves everybody, minus the preschool people because they'll be watching kids. So we're trying to do this in a time frame that will be able to involve everybody to embrace the idea altogether rather than, getting a couple different messages or like the telephone game that was mentioned earlier. It's just these common themes throughout this whole process, in everyone's little department or movement bubble. And we just feel like this is really proactive. This is something, the logistics of this aspect of co-locating was on the table 2 years ago as, possibly happening much sooner. And so it's still pretty fresh for Brad and I. And quite honestly, speaking for myself, I just want to kind of start to rip the Band-Aid off. It's really difficult to, I don't want to pretend that, oh yeah, we're meeting and we're doing this stuff and we're doing that stuff when things then start to pile up and we don't. So we have a schedule now and things are on the calendars and we're getting together and we're progressing. We got to get there.
Good.
Thank you. Mike?
I would agree. I think this is a great idea, and I thank you both for bringing it forward. The question I have, and it's ignorance of the physical layout of that building, is there room for everybody to come from 81 Main without having to reinvent the wheel at 75 Maple?
Yeah, there is.
The building can
Certainly is a
accommodate-
question that needs to be addressed, but there is as to how exactly we would divvy things up, but there is space. I think we would probably end up losing the conference room over there in order to accommodate additional offices. So that would be the sacrifice.
Yep, but there's enough physical space to be able to comfortably put both staffs together and they won't be crawling all over each other.
It won't be that much of a different feeling for myself and 81 Main Street staff. So I think it'll be a
Gee,
bigger
what do you mean by
cultural-
that, Ally?
I think it'll be a bigger cultural change maybe for EJRP, but that's what we do. We're in the profession of being flexible to new ideas and working on the fly to make things work and making sure everyone's good to go and
Yeah.
still wants to come and work and do the
Well,
fun things.
Congratulations and thank you. It's a great idea.
Andrew?
From the customer service aspect, this is fantastic, especially to help reduce the number of times. Which door do I go to? Which building is it? Is it the red slide? Is it the spray ground? Which one is it? Which brochure? And just to make sure that we're all on the same page, this is in regards to exploring the concept and how this could work. This isn't us telling you, yes, 81 Main staff, you're going to 75 Maple Streets, or 75 Maple staff, or building, right? This is just the exploration of that, and at some point in time in the future, you'll come back and here's how we're going to make that work.
Yes, the recommendation is just about exploring, because we would like to see that there's some confidence or preference from the boards that we engage in this. It's a pretty huge body of work, and so we're happy to do it, but only if it's something that the boards are interested in. I think that's also a question for you and Evan at some point. I mean, I think on a technical basis, probably Evan can decide what happens with staff and locations. I think the budget impacts are places where your boards will have direct say. But I think I would leave that to Evan as to, how he eventually, based on what we discover, if that comes back to the boards for a decision or if that's a decision he makes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and we'll discuss those policy or those funding thresholds and when that does have to come back to us, so, yeah.
Yeah.
And we do want to put sort of a time frame on this so that it's doable and we're meeting expectations of ourselves and our staff involved. Without a false advertisement, again, either of if we're gonna do all this stuff and then we're gonna sit and wait and see what happens. So, would be nice with approval to explore this if there's a schedule to also give you updates so that we can progress with that schedule on if it's really just, info reading material or if we can start to make some decisions and actions on that.
Okay, Mike?
If we did put this on a fast track, would your plan be to work on this over the winter and be ready for spring? Would that be the idea?
Ready in what way?
Ready as in,
We're gonna move? Not the spring.
okay,
No, the idea, as mentioned in the memo, would, if we were going to rip the Band-Aid off and do it, it would be September. Summer and prepping for summer, so spring is really not a great time for us in those preparations of pools and parks and things like that.
Yeah.
Final preps for camps. And then all of our staff is everywhere and anywhere in the summer months. And so we want to have a good handle around the springtime for sure, because then it's going to happen, if it comes to that, and we want to be ready to make that move. And coming from a department that has moved a couple times in the last 3 years, I think Adrian's employment has involved a couple different locations just in her time with us. Once we move, I don't really want to move anytime soon. Again, it's a big disruption. But again, we'd be looking for the fall timeframe to co-locate.
But with the decision in the spring, hopefully, is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I think we need to be ready, and we have kind of our meeting schedule to go up until March timeframe, so.
Okay, other questions, comments? Andy?
I'm wondering if this is a question we need to ask our new lawyer. If we end up in a district model where we have services available for a certain district that they are paying for. Is there any complication with having different districts serviced out of the same location? I just don't know. I'm just trying to, I'm not looking for an answer today, but it's just, I don't think it would be a problem, but I don't know. You know, who pays for the building can be a big, big question once you. So our governance model may affect how things are paid for, right?
I mean, we're kind of doing that today, really, right? We have village staff at 81 Main, and it's happening today.
Town staff at 2 Lincoln.
And if I understand, we're not merging the departments, they're
Right,
co-locating,
right.
so we're not even going to be commingling funds per se of how people are being charged. It is just that they're cooperating, almost like in the airlines with a code share. If you know what I mean, it's like you can't get on this flight, but you're a United member and they kind of use somebody else.
Co-share.
Co-
They say co-chair, I'm like, there's a co-chair on a plane.
Co-chair. And we aren't, okay. Well, there's a lot of alignment that has to include fees and other things, but the monies go to the town and to the village, et cetera. And then we'll figure out how to charge off some other things to them.
Just like now with our systems, they're going to certain GL accounts, and, what would be really nice is we have one system, we've upgraded, to the new software that EJRP did over a year ago, and so we know the look of things, we know how to operate that sort of stuff. It's gonna get dispersed correctly, and Sarah and Lauren love their numbers, and they will make sure that nothing mixes up.
And to be clear, there are budget things that we need to put in this year and as we do it for next year, because there always is. Of course. And these guys do love their numbers.
They do. So this would allow the opportunity to better coordinate programming as well, which is a positive for the community, certainly. Is it too early to tell if there'd be any cost savings or added expenses by doing this? Too early for that?
One thought as mentioned in the memo is, looking at one phone number, one brochure. So right now we're both sending out each is 16 to 24 page brochure within days of one another.
Same day this fall.
Oh, it was the same day this fall. Yep. See how good we are? And so now it would be one, and it wouldn't be as though the left side of the staple is one department and the right side is another. It would be categorized similarly of community, youth, after school, adults.
Yeah.
And there wouldn't be this, so who am I and where do I go? And it's just streamlining people and that convenience, which also means it's one postage bill, to the same, so it's not duplicating that. So right now we're paying 2 postage, paying 2 printing. And, we have found that there are some duplications with even similar programs that are in the fall brochure this year. And as much as our programmers talk and try and coordinate, there's duplication. This summer, both of the movie and the park nights were scheduled for the same exact night. So the 2 programmers said, well, let's just combine and we'll get signage and advertising out correctly so people know where to go. And it's only gonna be one and we're gonna gather together. So they're making those as we go along. This just makes it a little bit more official.
So we're not consolidating, we're just co-locating, but would there be opportunity for staff of one organization to back up the other if there were a need arises that somebody is out of the office? Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can't even start to predict all of the ways in which co-locating will benefit us, but yeah, just having people in the same room, people with the same skills who are doing the same jobs, absolutely. If somebody's out of town, somebody's away, somebody has something going on, it would just be much more natural for somebody else to fill in and be really easy.
Do you see any downside? Any anticipated problems by doing this?
I mean, I think the challenge is really gonna be on us and our staff. From a user standpoint, you're gonna get one brochure, sign up for a program. Internally, we're gonna know that that money goes to a certain department and that certain staff people run it, and that it gets charged to a certain budget. I think, currently, anytime you take two entities and put them in the same house, there's gonna be challenges of figuring out how to work together, and so I think Ally said, from the start, that if everybody's ready for it, and everybody knows there'll be some bumps along the way, that's normal, but it'll take a little while to all get comfortable, but we are both open to it as the leaders of our departments, and so I think our staffs are on board as well.
But once those bumps are worked out, you should be in a much better place.
It'll be like 117, it's so nice and smooth now, We all coming from the 81 Main Street side, one thing that came up in the start of our conversations together was this one-stop shopping aspect, where Brad and his team already feel that way with recreation. That's what you go to Maple Street for, is that subject of shopping. We do see a benefit when taxes and water and dog licenses are due. We get different flows of people because we're there. So I would be prepared as boards. I don't think it is the stopping point whatsoever. Again, change is different. Change is a bump in the road, and you can get over it just fine once you slow down and understand the process and know that it's all good, because the conveniences coming out are so much greater than this, and you've kind of all gone through that before, when, streamlined billing and how to pay and where to pay happened as well. So, that'll just be a change, but people still come to our door thinking we're the police department. So it takes time, and they don't even know where the police department is. We wonder where they've been for the last couple of years, so it'll be fine.
Okay, good answer. Thank you. Irene?
I'm really excited about the time and money savings potential. Ally did mention the 2 years since the last go around, and I would just urge us to recognize where we are. We did not do a post-mortem after the last proposal to combine the recreation departments. Some of the voters remember hearing in this very room about 2 years ago that if that did not pass, the recreation departments would never merge. So I think it's really important that we explain and work through some of the hiccups that have been left undealt with so far as to what happened 2 years ago. And one of the complaints that voters had was they were afraid one recreation department would be absorbed into the other. They wouldn't recognize their rec department anymore. I think your awareness of those issues still being live out there, if not in this room, is huge to making this successful. I like the idea of you waiting to move, not doing it right away. I think these memos are written in September. It's now October, and I'm just seeing them. One meeting's already happened, so I think it's really important that you bring not only the boards, but the public along with every single step here, lest people feel like something's going on without their knowing it. That's happened in the past, and it has not worked to anyone's advantage.
Yeah, again, on that note, it's, we were waiting to be with you both at the same time because we're going into this as a team and we want to approach you as that way. So yes, I agree. There has been discussion along the way, but I think that's what you all would want us to be doing instead of just sitting and waiting. At the same time, on the transparency aspect, it's hard to tell the community exactly what we're doing. We can talk about our alignment meetings, but to really talk this co-locating step deserved a little bit of a wait because we want the blessing of the boards to actually do this. And we don't want, if we find that it's not gonna work, then we'll accept that. We've accepted that. I would say that maybe the feeling was a little bit different for some people after the vote than others, than that it did feel a little depressing of all the hard work that we had done and at least for myself, I wanna put the work in again, knowing that there's going to be a good outcome. We all have a lot on our plates, and this is really important to us, and we wanna make it a priority, because there are some things on hold for our two departments that need the next step in order to happen.
And Irene, I would, it says on here, if so, are there additional questions? I would encourage all of you to email questions to Evan, please, and so that Ally and I are addressing them over the course of the next several months. We really don't want to get to March or April and all of a sudden have a bunch of questions come up.
Amen.
That are game changers or stoppers. So
Yep.
we would welcome any and all questions, and we would encourage you to get them to us early so that we can give them careful consideration.
Okay, that's a great suggestion, yeah.
Yep.
Send them to Dan. Irene?
I wonder if we can get some monthly reports from you as you meet and hash these things out. Maybe that's too frequently, maybe it needs to be every other month, but just to keep the boards really apprised so that we can formulate those questions, because if we don't hear from you for another 6 months, then it will mean the questions are coming too late for you, maybe.
Evan, what do you think? It's your folks.
I'm thinking more on a quarterly basis, but certainly nothing longer than quarterly. Because, again, we all have a lot on our plates, and I don't know how in-depth it could be. If they could do it sooner, great, but nothing longer than quarterly.
And I mean, trustees will be seeing Brad for budget stuff in December, and then myself in January, so that's not too far off, and it gives you the focus of your December joint meeting, to stay focused on the first topic of the agenda tonight, and that you'll be seeing us soon after that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'd be great to get the feedback quarterly, if that's good, appropriate, to hear how that's going.
Great.
We do, yeah. So we'll have to see what the boards want to do with that, but it sounds pretty positive to me. Other comments, questions?
Okay.
What's the,
Sorry, I got one.
yeah, Andy?
I almost didn't say it, but I will. One of the possible governance outcomes on our list of possibilities is separation of the town and the village. So just as a word of warning, it may, that's still a possibility. But
And if it helps at all, if our department from 81 moves over to 75, I don't think that the next staffing group is going to be waiting at the door to move right in, that if something did change on the governance side, then we would be left homeless, so to speak. So I think there's that grace period of some vacancy over there purposely, not to be pessimistic on that side of things, but to be realistic.
Okay. Irene?
Any chance of a neutral location? Because I know some folks wouldn't want to see either rec department moving into each other's quarters, just because.
Our dream is to have one rec facility and one amazing place that involves 365 days of indoor space, because we're very limited. It would be ideal, but as we know, finding buildings that have adequate parking and office workspace and program space is pretty difficult right now. So sure, we'll get in someone's, on someone's good side and hope that they can donate some money. But no, I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon.
Mr. Duggan?
Just to add to that, we do have the space needs, or building needs analysis, RFP is out. We've gotten several inquiries on that. Parks and Recreation is one of the departments that is being studied, so
Good point.
I would guess it's probably not imminent by any means, but it certainly is gonna be considered and as part of the study.
Thanks, Greg.
And Ally and I, in looking at aligning some of our policies, I think what we've been clear about is it's not picking EGRP's policy or EPR's policy, it's about identifying the best policy, and so
Best practice.
Yeah, and so there might be some things where I don't really like our structure.
I actually think
I
it's
don't
a
like
great-
your and she
Yeah.
doesn't like her structure, so
Great, let's change.
Yeah, let's do a different structure. So, you know, just in regards to, you know, trying to remove that territorialness of everything, and, you know, seeing 75 Maple Street as the hub of recreation, and there'll still be 2 logos and 2 departments, but it will just be a little bit more convenient for folks.
Okay, all right.
Will the village be charging the town rent? How does that work?
I think that's part of the questions in here, I think.
Okay, we haven't said that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I don't think we want to speculate really on much, because we haven't decided on anything, but
Okay.
I think part of the reason that these conversations need to happen now is if there are any budget implications, that they need to be woven into the discussions over the next few months. So that we can't really make a decision in the spring if we didn't consider FY20 budget implications.
You know, Irene, I don't think anyone on the trustees had thought of that, just to let you know. Glad you brought it up.
That's so nice of you.
Anytime, I got constituents in both places, so I got it big.
You
Okay.
gave them the same deal you gave the seniors.
There you go.
Was that $1?
$1.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. We're not charging you rent on 81 Main Street, are we? I mean, that's owned by the town. But what
We
did
take care of the
what did Dan say about a
Right.
municipality owning something in another municipality?
Exactly.
We're gonna need a lot of
It's
advice.
still the
here.
town, it's still the town. This is still the town also.
All right.
All right, can I make a recommendation?
Yeah, let's go.
I'll go for the trustees. We recommend that recreation and other municipal staff invest time and energy in exploring the concept of co-locating Essex Parks and Recreation and Essex Junction Recreation and Parks at 75 Maple Street, starting in September 2018.
Second.
19.
Andrew, second.
With that friendly amendment for 19.
Sorry, thank you.
All right, any further discussion on the trustees? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, what's the select board's pleasure?
I would use that, I would propose that same language, which I cannot seem to find. I recommend that the select board instruct the recreation and other municipal staff to invest time and energy in exploring the concept of co-locating Essex Parks and Recreation and the Essex Junction Recreation and Parks at 75 Maple Street, starting in September of 2019.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion about approving the exploration of the concept of co-locating the rec department? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, 5-0. Thank you, and good luck. Thanks for bringing that
Thank you.
forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good, it's good.
Right.
Sure.
Let me know. Well, let's text me.
Okay, up next is adoption of a revised purchasing policy. Lauren and Sarah, come on up, or stay where you are.
Alright. Now I'm just sitting right now.
Thank you.
Some motorized.
That was nice. Thank you.
I gotta do push around all day.
Take it away.
So you have, both boards have seen the purchasing policy. I have made changes that have been requested. One was to the town attorney language. Hopefully that is acceptable. On page 7, I made a change asked for by the trustees to add contracts for major purchases shall be awarded by the town select board and village board of trustees as appropriate. Hopefully that answers.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Lauren? I didn't hear you.
I don't see
Okay,
that
on page 7, under major purchases, down about in the middle of the paragraph, I added a line that says contracts for major purchases shall be awarded by the town select board, village board of trustees as appropriate.
Do we have a couple of different copies of
We
this?
have one that's
it's
marked
not on
up,
page
and one,
7.
this is the
Okay.
non-marked up one,
Gotcha.
because those
Okay.
numbers are
Sorry.
all over
Yeah,
the
all right.
place.
The one that says draft on it.
Okay, it's on 9, if you're.
No,
It's
they
on
all
that?
say draft.
Can we do the marked up one, because that has the changes in it?
I just gotta find them.
Because then it highlights.
It's harder to find them, that's all.
It's page
Well,
9.
page nine.
Page 9, okay.
Do you want a hard copy?
Yeah, I did actually have a hard copy of the market plan. So if you look at, under major purchases, and it's up on the screen now, contracts for major purchases shall be awarded by the town select board, village board of trustees as appropriate. And then, on page, the one on pre-qualification, down a ways. Okay, under pre-qualification, on page 15, we've added that the unified manager may require pre-qualifications for a project estimated to exceed $250,000. That was from the trustees meeting. And
there was no number there before.
there was no number there before. There had been in a prior policy, and I had neglected to put it in. So, went back and grabbed that language. There's the place on page 17 where we changed citizens to residents.
Yeah.
And then under the town attorney, it kind of mirrors the description that we've got for the village and outlines when the town attorney can be used, and that he goes through she goes through the unified manager, or they do. So I can read that if you'd like. Staffs for the general public use of paid legal counsel shall be authorized by the unified manager. Select board shall coordinate their use of legal counsel through the unified manager, except when the select board is conducting an investigation into the conduct of the unified manager or considering removal of the unified manager in accordance with section 117-209B1 of the town charter. The unified manager shall have the right to retain outside legal counsel if the town attorney has a conflict of interest or determines it is in the best interest of the town. And that language matches what the village attorney. And those are the major changes since you saw the draft, the first draft.
Yeah, appreciate the track change. That's very, very helpful. Yeah, thank you. Okay, comments, questions?
So we're asking for adoption at this meeting, and I actually have a copy for signature if that happens.
Okay.
I actually have some other questions.
Oh, no.
Sorry, Lauren.
Oh, no.
3, maybe 4.
Yeah.
So going with the page numbers based on the track changes version.
Okay.
At the very top of page 9, where it's talking about minor purchases for those 2 to 5,000, there's a piece where it says competitive quotes from at least 3 vendors should be obtained. In other places it says shall. In general, shall says you should. This is something you must do, where should is if you feel like it. There's a little bit of gray area.
So, where are we, page 9?
9.
Yeah.
First
The very top of page 9, the start of the sentence with complete quotes. I would just recommend that should be changed to shall, to take out the gray area.
Okay.
On page, do you want me to wait?
Yeah, let me just write
Yeah.
down these changes. Page 9. Shall be, okay. And what page?
9. Oh, the next one?
Mm-hmm.
On page 12, I had alluded to this at our last meeting, but I don't think I was very specific with it. On page 12, when we're talking about the sealed bid process and where this would go to, I'm curious why we don't add the Vermont Department of Economic Development's online bid system, which is used by the state departments, it's used by the regional planning commissions, it's used by many other towns and communities, especially when papers like the Essex Reporter don't deliver to all of Essex. And the Burlington Free Press is a subscription-only offering. So that would at least get it out to many, many different suppliers and many different competitors.
Okay, so where do you suggest we put that in?
Under the sealed bid process, where it says notice of the request for bids shall be made by letters to known providers, advertisements posted in that section as to where it should go.
And it's online bid services of the
Is
state of Vermont?
Is the Vermont Department of Economic Development's online bid system.
Okay.
There's no cost in that, probably, right?
No.
No, it's free. It's a great service by the state. On page 14, when we are talking about criteria for bid selection, with numbers 14, 15, and 16, I would prefer that those not be, so minority and women business owners must be included, unified manager, not selected bidder who is listed in the excluded party system, and the unified manager designee will recommend a bid award for the approval by the town or select board or trustees. I'd like to see those not be the case only when it's supported by federal funds, and to see those moved up one section, so that that's just a general practice.
So we've already said we do prefer local contractors. These are for federal bids.
Right.
You know, and they can be only under over $2,000 too. For federal bids, they will require these sealed bids.
So if it were in a section similar to how 11 says for construction projects over 2,000, if it were at a higher level as well, that's fine. I don't mean that pencils need to be purchased that you need to go through that level of scrutiny.
So this is basic, this special language is for federal funds, where we've already covered everything else.
And they seem like best practices. Especially, I mean, all of them in their own unique way. In particular, like number 15 with the excluded parties list, you get on that list if the federal government says we won't do business with you because you've done something wrong.
Right.
You shouldn't do business with them.
True.
Again, these are just my recommendations. There's 8 others of us here who can say Andrew, no. But so that's that one. The only other thing with number 14, it's mentioned up on page 4 about the overall philosophy and that small/minority/women business owners will be included. I would assume then that with number 14, small column should be added to, or should be added in front of minority.
Where are you?
So the original mention of small comma minority, or small/minority/women business owners is on page 4. Where it says affirmative action, local preference, whenever possible, qualified small, minority, and women-owned businesses shall be included. My understanding is a federal distinguishes the same definition as the 14 should also have the small in it too.
So what line from page 4 are you suggesting gets moved or added to 14?
Page 4, the only thing I'm recommending for page 4 is that after affirmative action, local preferences say whenever possible, I'm sorry, that language from 4 of
gets
all that
carried
small
to.
gets carried down to number 14.
I just want to ask a question. I don't have a problem with that, Andrew, but Lauren, were you saying that the language for 13 through 16 is derived directly from some other document that discusses how to apply for federal funds?
It is.
Is there a concern that if you amend some of that you are going to wind up having to re-amend it later on? I'm only raising that there might be some binding reason why we have to just use this.
So for 13 specifically, we have already said we have a preference for local businesses. You can't do that with federal funds. Okay, so that has to stay in there.
Yeah, and I'm not recommending 13 moving. I was recommending 14, 15, 16 moving.
14, 15, 16.
And then 14 again include the language that's up above on page 4.
Yeah.
Just
we've
to-
already said, I mean, it's kind of redundant because we've already said that the minority businesses will be considered. So we can move.
Right,
that.
we said whenever
Yeah.
possible, right. This just helps to, again, add the whenever possible.
Yeah.
So that would be added to the language in 4, under affirmative action, you're suggesting gets,
It's the
in
word,
addition to what's there
Small
for
and
14?
add the small.
it's the word small
The
with a
small.
comma after it,
Okay,
get added in front of, I think it's minority. Yes, in front of minority.
okay, qualified small. That's what you want to have added at 14? Qualified small, comma?
Right.
Okay, and the same for, what about 15?
So 14, 15, and 16 would essentially be relisted to, I'm assuming to
But they would go up above, so it'd be 12,
13, 14 at that
14,
point.
15, 16, and then 13 would still stay below
Right.
the in addition.
Right. 13 would be the only thing under the in addition to the above in the case of supported by federal funds.
Okay. Okay, is that clear to everybody?
That works.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Andy?
Is it clear what it means to be, what you need to do to get on the excluded parties list? Because, it's like legal to buy marijuana and, well, it's not yet legal, it's legal to grow your own, you can't sell it, can you? But anyway, it's a bad example, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's any situation where you'd, I guess there's no situation where you'd want to buy something from the excluded parties list. So.
It's my understanding, having gone through this at a previous employment experience, is that if somebody is convicted of fraud by the federal government, if you've been convicted of a federal crime, that the federal government says you're essentially blacklisted from doing business with us.
Right.
Okay. Okay, other questions? Irene?
If I could go back to the change on 12, I just want to make sure that I know where you're inserting this. Are you inserting it such as this bidding service? Are you putting it in right here? Because it mentions a bidding service.
So you mean the Vermont Department of Economic
Yes.
Development? That's to specifically call it out, a bidding service for advertising bids.
Such as, are you going to put it there, or were you adding it up here? I just wasn't sure where you were adding it.
What I had recommended is that it be added not at the in lieu of, just given that it says may be utilized, I'd rather see that be the standard practice, similar to how things get sent to the Essex Reporter and the Rome Free Press. That a standard practice we utilize this free service to go beyond just a pay-for subscription or a paper that's delivered to part of a community.
Does that negate the need for that sentence that says in lieu of then, after all those other things, since
If
you're
it's-
mentioning a bidding service?
If something is better than those, then that could be a bidding service, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So we could go in, yeah, and so we could go just to the bidding service without the advertisements. That's what it
As
says,
that
in lieu of
reads, yes.
newspaper.
If there's a bidding
Yeah.
service that may be utilized, my assumption is not stated in here, is that by going with a bidding service, it's because it would be better and get better results than what any of those others would get.
But you might still want to use all of them.
Yes.
But you could just use the one.
So one bidding service?
That's what the rule says. In lieu of a newspaper advertising, a bidding service for advertising bids may be utilized. So we could just use that one, or we could use them all. It'd be depending on what
I mean,
the
I don't know.
purchasing agent wanted to do.
I don't know what a bidding service for advertising bids is. I don't actually know what that means.
Okay, so that's not what you were.
No, that is not.
Okay.
No, what I'm advocating for is this free web-based system that the state of Vermont uses, that the departments for the state of Vermont use, that many organizations use to get a very broad reach.
And it was specifically, you want to add Vermont Department of Economic Development bid system, and you want to add that after what word or in what sentence? After 7 days, comma instead of a period? Or the next sentence where it says advertising bids may be utilized, comma, for example?
For
Department.
maybe for ease, have it be right after town and village web pages, so that way we can keep the and advertisements where it is. So where we have, so where it says town and village web page, then add the new one of Vermont Department of Economic Development online bid system.
Okay.
Wish these didn't make so much noise.
And do we need a such as or something after we say notice shall be made to known providers? Do we wanna say such as, so nobody's constrained to having to do all those things, or just one of those things, you know what I'm saying? It strikes me as a little odd that we're giving a whole list of things, and I'm not sure whether those are optional or mandatory.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, so what?
No, I'm not saying, no, it's wisdom, she does this all the time.
Bids shall be made, well, it's not gonna be just letters to known providers, it's also gonna, we're gonna advertise as well.
Okay,
Okay?
okay, so those, that's the series, okay,
Yeah,
got it, thank you,
So now, just in addition, we're gonna do the
we're gonna
Department
do all of these
Economic
things.
Development.
thank you.
Okay, okay. Okay, is that clear to everybody? Clear as mud? Okay. Anything else? Andy?
Sorry, I want to go back to page 14. Number 16, as written, is under the federal requirements. It says, "The unified manager designee will recommend a bid award for approval by the town select board village trustees." If we move that up, does that mean that all bid awards need to be approved by the,
They already do,
we already do?
we already did that.
No, so I mean, do we already do that? Do
As a practice.
we approve all bid selections?
The town has not in the past, but the village has, and we want to align it so that everybody does it the same. And so we're gonna have the select board awarding bids.
Is that onerous?
And I talked to Dennis about it, and he's fine with it.
No, okay.
What it is, we have to build it into the schedule of what we're doing. So you schedule when you kind of backdate it. You go to what select board meeting you have to get to, then you make sure you advertise, get a selection, do your process, and then do the bid. It may add a couple of days, but
The way it was written before Andrew made his suggestion to move it into the general practice, it was only federal money that needed to be
But we
approved by
had
the
already added
select
that
board,
for other we had already added it, that any major
right?
contract
So
would
it's
be
already,
awarded.
so it's already included somewhere else?
It is.
it is not a bad idea.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure it's not onerous work for you. I mean, you sometimes ask us not to give you more work.
In this case, I think we discussed it, we thought it's our routine practice, and we think that it's really, it's a good, it wasn't something we wanted to give up. That it's
Part of our
pretty good
fiduciary
thing.
responsibility.
So just getting to the point, the other point I want to get to here, I guess, is this language is in here specifically to address federal funds. If we already have that policy somewhere else in the document that says we're going to do it anyway, and we need this language in here to satisfy a federal auditor, do we want to leave it where it is and not move it if we already have it covered somewhere else? That's,
Where it's covered is under the major purchases.
well, I don't care where it's covered, just that it is. If you tell me it is, then I'm fine.
But then it's gonna be above, so it's gonna be part of the regular routine, and the thing that's below this is in addition to that,
Right.
so it'll already be.
Okay, all right.
Okay, what else do we have on this?
Sounds like me.
That's it? Okay. So we made, in addition to the red lines that were in our packet, we made changes then to pages 9, 12, and 14. Is everybody clear with what those changes were? Okay, all right.
What's the process, though? Are we gonna have to revise this and bring it back to our next joint meeting, or do we feel what can we do here?
Can we
Do a
adopt it as amended?
I'd
And
be
then
willing to
have
do
you
that. Is
sign it
everyone happy with
at
that?
another
Yeah,
meeting?
we do that.
Yes.
Yeah. What's up, back?
Yes, please.
Andy?
I move that the Essex Select Board adopt the Town of Essex purchasing policy as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Irene. Any further discussion about approving the purchasing policy as amended? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Trustees?
I'll move the Village of Essex Junction trustees adopt the Town of Essex / Village of Essex Junction purchasing policy as amended.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes, thank you.
You're not done.
Yeah, but they're not done.
No.
So do you
Oh,
want,
I was
I did that one. I'll do the next one. So the next item is adoption of records retention policy and finance department retention plan.
I do want to tell you all that the purchasing policy was all Lauren, and I'm pleased to sit next to her while she presents it. But she's worked tirelessly on this, and I'm so glad she did before she retired. So thank you, Lauren, and thank you all for your support and your comments and your feedback on it.
And it was Jim Jutras approved.
Oh, that's key.
Finally,
gold
yeah,
stamp.
it took a long time for that one.
That's a high bar.
Okay, so we'll go on to the retention policy.
So after meeting with the select board and the trustees, I did not receive any comments for changes. I did notice on page 2 under references, I had bullets A, B, C, and D, but bullet number D was part of bullet C, and so I have deleted the D. We printed a clean copy for signature,
Okay.
Unless there are other changes this evening.
Andrew, any?
I've only got 4.
Okay. I'm getting, is that like your average? I'm sorry, for future. So I know what to expect.
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody have any comments on? Okay, all right, what's the board's pleasure?
I will make a motion that the village trustees adopt the revised records retention policy.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Okay. What about the select board? Mike?
Chairman, I recommend, I move that the select board adopt the town, I move that the town of Essex Select Board adopt the town of Essex and Village of Essex Junction records management policy and retention plan.
Thank you, Mike. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Thank you, Irene. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the, of approving, actually, right?
We're adopting.
Adopting the record retention plan, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously.
Thank
Great.
you all very much.
Thank you.
Pass it around the answer now.
Moving forward here.
That one should be signed.
Struggling now.
All right.
I'd walk that baby around, Sarah.
Well, if it does put me by the cookies, so yeah, I will.
Yeah, so tomorrow there'll be the conversation of why Lauren should have done the records retention. I made Sarah do the other one. We'll take care of that in the office tomorrow.
Okay, we're gonna go on to item 5F, and that's scheduling of future joint meetings and attendance policy. I have it here down for that one.
Yeah, as you see in your packet, obviously we have made it through October, we have December 5th. As we've sort of talked about this enough, it is very difficult to get 9 to 10 schedules together on the fly. So we were kind of hoping to have a discussion while we had you all in the same room to maybe map out either 6 more months or a whole year, and this time eliminate Christmas as a potential meeting date, which the village has. We're gonna have to cancel that meeting. But if we can get some schedules, and so, again, that's one component. The other one is you have sort of, by together, policy said you'd like to all be in the same room. It's very important that 9 of you be here. So it's very important that we get your schedules together. And/or does that hold true going into next year? If one is not available, do you still have a meeting? You may want to have that discussion as to how you want to move forward.
Okay, why don't we start with the dates that are out there? I mean, these are intended to be
Yeah.
far enough out there.
And do Thursdays work?
Mondays and Tuesdays are very difficult with your schedules, with the meetings in the different places, but I don't know if there's magic of a Wednesday or Thursday, but
If I could, I put out the first Wednesday because I don't believe there's any conflicts with other boards and committees, so we can certainly consider other dates. I have to get creative with locations, but certainly open for discussion. That was the reason behind the first Wednesday that was put out there for the sake of starting the conversation.
Yeah, I'd also point out that I know the Village Planning Commission meets on Thursdays. The Town Planning Commission meets on Thursdays. So it could potentially put us in a bind in terms of space. That doesn't mean we can't find some other space, but it is one thing to consider. And I also personally like to attend Planning Commission meetings.
And that's what these dates are, right? These are all Wednesdays. Yeah. Okay. And they're further enough out there that these can get on your calendar, and as your life progresses and you have to schedule things, that you know this is out there and you can hopefully avoid it whenever possible. Andy?
I play ukulele with my band on Wednesday nights. I guess I can rearrange that. So this is just for 2019, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure because the first Wednesday in April in 2020, there won't be a select board chair yet because we won't have had the organizational meeting to get one, to elect one.
good point.
You're
Just-
so forward thinking. That's great.
But since it's 2019 only, it's not an
What
issue.
time is the band?
We're 7:30 to 9:30 on Wednesdays. Yeah.
Is it the first Wednesday or the second
Yes,
Wednesday?
yes.
It's the first Wednesday.
Is it the first
Yeah.
So
Wednesday?
that's
Yes.
gonna be a.
So we can't do this.
It's not gonna
Okay.
work. It's not gonna work for a whole bunch of
So you do it
reasons.
Thursday, that.
Do the next Wednesday.
So that would then become
Second
April
one.
10th?
Yeah, 10th,
April 10th.
which is an energy committee meeting.
What's that?
It's an energy committee meeting night, second Wednesday.
We're gonna get it all.
Oh, well, I think this this board may take a little more precedence over it.
Okay,
But
so we're changing the 3rd to the 10th?
Correct.
Is it, okay?
Wait, the April one?
April 3rd, yeah.
to the 10th.
Yeah.
Are there any other conflicts through the calendar other than ukulele? I'm sorry. And I do want to hear the ukulele stuff. I hear it's fantastic. I'm not kidding. That's what I heard. It's all over the library.
Okay, so we move on to then the policy of, we had said that we want at least 4 members from each to be there. For obviously quorum, you need 3 to keep things moving and knowing that life happens. Are you okay if we go to the quorum minimum of 3 and still have the meeting if 2 people for some reason can't make it? Elaine?
It depends on the topic.
Yeah.
If we're approving policies, I'm okay with a quorum. If we're making decisions based on consolidation, I am not okay with just a quorum.
Yeah.
Me neither.
Okay, good point. All right. So then, yes, but with the exception of, with the option that, I mean, how would we make that a policy?
Well, I think what we can do is just set these dates and then play it by ear, depending upon what's on the agenda. I think we have to have some flexibility. Life happens.
Okay,
Yeah. That's a good point.
all right.
Yeah, I'm concerned about a quorum, because right now with Elaine serving 2 boards, we could have 5 people at that meeting, which is a far cry from the 9 we have right now. But a certain 5 people could meet that quorum requirement for both boards, could it not? And I think that's awkward. I think the more people, the better decisions we can make.
Elaine would have awesome power. Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, depending on, because that, right around then, we could be looking at some really critical decision about consolidation. I think we'd want to make sure, but then again, you'd also think that everyone would make a special effort to be there.
Right.
I might get deployed somewhere, who knows?
Yeah, you can't tell.
Can I say something?
Right, well, we'd want you there. Lori?
I think we're setting these dates far enough out that we should all plan to be here.
Okay.
I don't think there's,
So keep our policy the same as 4, but if we see a joint meeting come up and maybe there's some things there that we could be okay with a quorum, should that happen, but hopefully it won't,
Yeah,
we can have that discussion then.
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Mike?
Phoning in is still an option, right?
Yeah,
Or Skyping.
yeah, Skyping, phoning in would still be an option.
It doesn't always work.
Because
but-
the 5th of June, I'll bet you is gonna be an issue, but
And if Skyping is the option, 81 Main is much better equipped to deal with that. When it works.
That brings up the question, do you want to still try to alternate between 81 Main and 2 Lincoln Street?
Sure.
Sure.
Anybody have an issue with that?
I think people have complained it's hard to hear, but it depends on the audience, I guess, and how well we're projecting. I don't
And
know
if the
if
air
the mics
conditioner's
pick us
on.
up, or, right, if the air conditioner's on, so we may want to pay attention to acoustics.
And I've started a conversation with IT, and actually earlier this evening with Mike about what are possibilities to add amplification for the back of the room.
We had it and we took it out. This was too loud.
okay.
So that'd be great if you could work on it.
I didn't say
on
it
that.
was gonna work, I just said I had a conversation.
Okay. Okay, but for now, we're okay to alternate, where we can just try to
Sure.
project our voice a little bit better when we're here.
I like Evan's warning that 81 Main is set up better for phoning in, so
I could set this up.
as long as we can be flexible on the either or.
We're just, Skype is a little bit better at 81, but again, if it's in the alternate, we'll make it work.
We've Skyped many meetings here.
Okay.
It
I
works.
Skyped in.
Didn't work for me last meeting.
And that was at 81, actually.
And that was at 81.
Yeah. Sorry.
We think it was the government.
Never mind.
I mean, I even took a shower, because I knew it was going
Never mind.
Some say Skype works better here.
Okay, let's get back in.
Okay.
All right,
We
so,
got the direction we need.
so we talked about the dates, the only change being from April 3rd, we're gonna make it the 10th, and we're gonna keep the requirement for the 4-member quorum for joint meetings unless we choose to do differently on a case-by-case, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is an action item, so we should, what's the board's pleasure on this?
Do you want to try to repeat all that and put it into a motion?
Typically in the select board.
Pardon?
So typically in the select board, the chair doesn't make motions, right?
I used to ask for.
How about I'll start and then
Go
you
ahead.
guys can copy me. How's that? I will make,
There you go.
I make a motion that the village trustees choose the following dates for joint meetings of February 6th, April 10th, June 5th, August 7th, October 2nd, December 4th, all in 2019. And that the meetings occur as long as both boards have at least 4 members in attendance, unless the agenda is policy oriented and we may choose to move it to a quorum on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
That work?
That works for me. I'll second that. Andrew seconds it. Any further discussion? Did that work for you, Elaine?
Yes, it
Yep.
does.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks.
Okay, what's, Irene?
I would move the same thing on behalf of the select.
Now,
Good job. Okay. Thank you, Irene, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimously 5-0. Thank you. You want to do the next one?
well, Evan's gonna do the next one. He wants to discuss, we want to get a sense of joint budget process and joint priorities, and just to get a sense, this is just general ideas, but Evan, I think it might be good if you ask us, kind of lead off and ask us generally what it is you're looking for.
Sure. You know, again, I see you together once every 2 months, so it's a time when you can give us some general direction of things of priority that you know of, that you want us to have answers for in the budget. I can give you some things, well, you
just co-hired an attorney. There's gonna need to be a budget for some expenditures.
Yep.
So something simple as, come up with some suggestive, budget numbers for an attorney. And maybe even how we would like to, cover those costs, town to village.
He's $150 an hour.
Is $150 an hour. We have talked about a little bit of, as a goal, it's more a select board, but adding police officers. We feel, we've heard a lot from the citizens at both town meeting and village meeting about police services. Not that they're doing a bad job, they just need more personnel. Those are the types of high-end, Andy has made the request, I'll get to remove the remaining 1 cent in the highway tax. And so that has been put in our list. So those are the types of overarching sort of, and how much, you know, you don't have to get into, you know, what percentage increase, but if you wanna say something general, like you said the other night, George, more of a cost of living area, unless it can be shown why we need to go past that, and what are those options. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Evan, I would like I'll let others speak, but just off the top of my head, I'd like to add to that, if we anticipate the possibility of some kind of a public outreach effort next year, we know that public outreach efforts can be pricey. We would want to do a good job, so I don't know what a good ballpark figure, but it might be good. And again, I don't know who would pay for that, if it should be jointly or what, but I would like to maybe give some thought to that.
Thank you. It's a good one.
Yeah, I had those two, Dan Richardson and some outreach projects as joint pieces to work on. Elaine?
As Brad and Ally just said to us a little while ago, co-location is going to require funding this year and next year.
Andy?
The other thing that the discussion with Brad and Ally brought to my mind is the question of who maintains the parks. Is there any way to consolidate park maintenance to save costs? That wasn't on my list I sent earlier. So.
Does the town rec department have do its own maintenance, or is that town public works?
No, town parks.
They have their own recs?
It's
their
2
own-
employees.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to go off of some of the notes that I took at the trustees meeting the other evening. So this doesn't impact the village so much, but the changes to the snowplow schedule based on the school transportation changes.
It could impact us because they have come out and said that they are offering K through 5 this winter.
Yeah, that
Here.
just happened today.
Yeah, so it could
Yeah.
impact us as well.
So, snowplow impacts. And then, forgive me, I'm just trying to read through my handwriting here. That's village, excuse me. Yeah, I think that was it.
Were you looking for joint village-town
Yeah,
things we're working together on?
both, but but you can think of anything that comes to your mind that, you know, gives us a head start, that may take us time to look into, but preferably joint, but it could be singular.
Right?
I honestly don't know who this would fall under, if it's joint or not, but we as trustees have been having some conversation about the senior center, and there's some needs there. I'm still unclear how that budget process works, so I'd like to throw that out.
Okay.
That should be on the list.
Mike?
Dennis wrote to us a short time ago about a program that the state was putting in for purchasing, and forgive me because I can't remember the topic, but he said that we were not going to participate because the pricing that the state was getting was
Oh, salt.
woefully high So I don't know that that's necessarily one of these that would be enough of a spike that it's, but
Staff is gonna have to look at how much salt we purchased this year for the budgeting
Right.
ability we have.
Yep.
Just in that particular case, I think both village and town have salt left over.
Yes.
And it'll be used to supplement.
Right. Anyway.
And used judiciously, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up about, I can't remember the number, but it's a significant jump this year.
Right, except that Dennis was still able to get it for
We still
significantly
got
lower
less
than what
than
the state was
state's
getting
buying,
it for.
but it's still up from where we were budgeting.
Yes.
All right.
Evan, you mentioned something about who pays. I would offer that the town-wide expenses should be paid by the town residents, so that everyone's paying equally toward these joint ventures.
For which-
And I would have to be, any of these joint ventures, they should be in the
Sure,
town
like
budget.
for
so
Dan
everyone
Richards,
pays Equally, yeah.
is there any, he was talking about, being able to service both masters. Is there any problem if it came
Yes.
just from the town?
Yes,
There
there is.
is. There is.
There is, because where he, I think that's one, I appreciate the gesture argument, but I think technically, I think, as I get this right, he has to, where the check comes from, that's his client, and if he doesn't get a check from the village, then we're not his client.
Technically, you're not his client.
So I think he has to get a check from both
So,
of us.
but one of the things.
Doesn't have to be 50/50.
No, it does not need to
No.
be 50/50. Yeah, it just needs to be paid from both clients. One of the things that we've been working on internally, and Andy, you gave some math one time, is trying to figure out that if it was 50/50, then the village is actually paying more than 50.
Yes, it's 75.
So we will find that right balance and get that number, and I was thinking somewhere in the 70-30 range comes out about right, but it's a couple of ticks off, so we'll figure that out internally. But in those cases, that ends up being 50. We wanna try to get either 50/50, or it doesn't need to be, but
But I kind of say, I raise a point to say, if you do it, if the town pays for it, that's all residents.
Yep.
Could the village, contribute $1? Would that satisfy
I
the
can
legal
certainly, I
requirement?
can ask him. I
Yeah.
will ask Dan what he's comfortable with.
Okay, good. But for the for the outreach, the community outreach
Yeah.
thing, that could be
It could be
From-
all town.
from the town, unless the village objects.
One of the things that we think about this is the message. And you don't wanna make it seem like if the town paid for it, then it's a town-led thing versus I think you're gonna wanna make sure that your messaging and your stuff is that you did this together.
Right.
And not get into, and we'll figure out the payments. There's a lot of money that goes between the two entities. We'll figure out in the budget process with some questions of how best to allocate it. Cause it may get down to $10,000 or $20,000 in the village budget to stay at a number where that number doesn't move the needle on the town side. So we'll figure that out.
Okay. All right.
And I would just say this harkens back to the definitions that Evan asked us to make many months ago. If we don't say the word town without defining it, we won't get into trouble. If we say town-wide every time we're talking about a town-wide expense, and we say town outside the village, we will never use the word town naked and leave room for posturing and questioning and wondering what we really mean.
I think it was in Dan's response to us, I could be wrong, but I read a document somewhere, I thought it was actually very clever, because it got around, it addressed this by referring to the town of Essex equals Selectboard, Village of Essex Junction equals Trustees, and thereafter, every time the document referred to the town or the village, it actually said Selectboard Trustees. So we became the surrogates for the entity we represent. So then you don't get into long acronyms and stuff like that. You can just say Trustees, Selectboard. It's a thought. It's a thought.
Okay, any other comments, questions, suggestions?
So let me,
Recap.
if you don't mind, anticipate public outreach, legal fees for consolidation, rec co-location. I added removal of the highway tax because that was something that had been brought up before. Consolidate park maintenance if possible. Snowplow plan impacts due to school busing, senior center needs.
Okay.
And of course, we talked about police, so I'll put that on the list. Police staffing.
Okay, did already missed that you're aware of? I think that covered it.
I think that's it.
Hold on one second. And well, this may not be one of your priorities, but one of ours is some type of building maintenance superintendent, whether that's from a staff side. I don't know if that rises to your level, but we'd also like to look and see how we can try to afford something in that realm, at least just to start.
Yeah, we did have that discussion at Selectboard, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I assumed that you were gonna come forward, the budget process with some ideas at the least, so, yeah.
That's a good list,
Yeah.
and it's exactly what I was
We're
looking
not,
for.
we're not done yet, though. Irene?
And I would object to getting rid of the 1% until we study that issue and do a deep dive on why we're getting rid of it, why we've had it all these years, and so forth. So I think there's a conversation that's in order that may be.
This is the town highway tax?
It's the 1.1.
And the town, the town highway tax pays for the town rolling stock, is that correct?
Currently, that's all it's.
Or is it just, what is it?
It
We'll have a
covers
conversation.
about the cost of the town rolling stock, but it's not designated that. It's a general tax that comes in toward the general fund. So right now, the amount it raises is about what goes to the capital fund for highway rolling tax,
For rolling stock?
But
Okay.
they're not.
They're not matched.
joined.
I mean, my only point is I hate to say this, but it's potential, if it was just the rolling stock, you're saying, well then, if additional funds are coming out of the town general fund for rolling stock, then some of those additional funds are coming from the village, so eliminating it would have a little bump on village taxes, just a thought.
We have some other reasons why we may want to address that.
To address
as well.
it?
So we'll put something together.
Yeah, as the public works gets more fully consolidated, that's one of the areas that we talked about in the Andy?
Maybe this isn't a topic on the agenda, but I've reconciled myself to the fact that highway tax is akin to the local option tax, where we offer tax breaks to large landowners so they keep their land open, and to veterans, they get a tax break as well. There was some agreement in the past that the select board and the trustees came up with that legitimizes that the way that tax has been implemented and charged all these years. I've finally reconciled that that's the way I look at it. It was an agreement that was made many years ago, and it's no different than giving veterans a break on their taxes. We don't tell them, well, you don't own this tiny piece of the truck that you didn't contribute to. And so I'm resigned myself to the fact that it's perfectly legal. We've done it correctly, but it may be time to get rid of it if there's a balance.
Yeah, and it was at 8 cents, and it's down to, I think, 1.1, right? It's getting towards 0, and I think we have perhaps an opportunity to get it to 0 this coming fiscal year, maybe. Right?
Like I said, we needed just a quick conversation. I think we're good. You can reserve the right to send me more at a future date.
Yep.
I'm sure you can.
I already sent mine.
Yeah, Andy, thank you.
Okay, and if there's nothing else on 5G, then we have a reading file. Are there any comments on that? It's a letter from the attorney. Andy?
Yeah, so the minutes for the two meetings that the subcommittee held both say at the top of them, select board and subcommittee. Did they actually get warned as select board meetings, or is that and properly labeled.
Greg can answer that, I think, right?
They were warned as Governance Subcommittee of the Selectboard and Trustees, or Selectboard Trustee Governance Subcommittee, something to that effect. Warned as a subcommittee meeting.
I believe the headings on both documents, those say it's a select board and a subcommittee meeting. Once I'm
No, again,
reading it.
select board and trustee subcommittee, so it's a subcommittee of both boards.
Okay, I guess I parsed it incorrectly when I read it. Yep, I parsed it incorrectly, I'm fine, thank you.
Looks like there's a comment there, maybe. Okay. Any other comments on the reading plan? Okay, good. Any need for executive session? Don't think so. Okay, then, motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn for the select board.
Thank you, Irene. Do I have a
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion about adjourning the select board? Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
I'll move trustees adjourn.
Who seconded it?
I did.
All right.
Feels so special.
Any further
Stan's not
discussion? All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
All right, good work.
Lori, I'm glad to know that you're there.
I'm there, but
Dan's
Dan's not here. I'm here.
I just commented to Lori,